everyone. Super excited to be here. Thank you for coming on a Sunday. I'm Jen from Girls Soccer Network, and just very excited to be able to have this event and to be able to do this series mostly with Erica, and who has been somebody who's been creating for us through editorials, sharing her wealth of knowledge as a sports conditioning, strength and conditioning coach. I'm muted. I just muted all. So again, Erica's been sharing her knowledge and experience as a strength and conditioning coach for women and girls soccer, and has really, really enlightened our community. And they've just adore her. And so we're grateful that we've been able to do these sessions, and very excited to have Emelia Funnell from IDA. IDA is the first brand that we ever worked with. Laura Youngson, always have to give Laura a shout out, has been, working in the women's game since we started around the same time, 2017. And she and her group have created a footwear for female soccer players, which is tailor-made for them. And again, the quality is incredible. And Emelia is a sports scientist who's been working with IDA for I don't know how long, but for a while. And she's been able to really help inform the building of these shoes that are, I think changing the game and going to help girls stay in the game longer. And that's why we do what we do. So I'm going to, hand it over to the experts right now, but letting people in still. Thank you guys again for coming, and enjoy.
Awesome. Well, yeah, I'm excited to be here with Emelia, and I'm going to be touching on the strength piece of ACL injury reduction, and Emelia will be doing more of the footwear, which is really exciting. So, Emelia, do you want to kick it off, or do you want me to kick it off? I'm fine with whatever.
Yeah, I think you go for it, and then I've kind of got some ideas on how to follow on from you. So,
Okay,
if you're
awesome.
happy to, yeah.
I will do that. Let me, I'll just share my screen, Jen, if you can. Okay, let's get this going. Okay, so as Jen said, I'm a strength and conditioning coach. I've been working primarily with girls soccer players for the past 13 years in ACL injury reduction, but also the performance side of things like speed and agility, and also endurance. But today I'm really going to touch on the strength aspect, because strength is such a powerful tool. It's a non-negotiable tool for our girls soccer players to really reduce chance of ACL injury. And I've seen some very magical things in the 13 years I've been doing this that strength training has done for girls soccer players. So I'm really excited to share the power of strength training. Okay, so these are the top 3 benefits that go into ACL reduction. So strength training increases muscle mass and it improves body composition. So with body composition, we are wanting to put on more muscle, get our bones stronger, really protect our ligaments and our joints as well. And this one is a really big one I like to emphasize, because oftentimes a lot of young girl soccer players, they focus on the weight on the scale, or just, maybe losing weight or whatever, and have body image issues. But I always tell girls, really chase a body composition where you are strong for your sport, which leads me to the next benefit of strength. If you're strong for your sport, you're able to handle game demands. So the demands of soccer are very intense, things like cutting, changing direction, being able to run at high speeds. And these are usually the movements in the game where ACLs happen. So the stronger we are, we can handle these high velocity demands a lot better. And another really cool thing about strength is it actually helps with muscle recovery and decreases soreness. So the stronger your muscles are, the more able they can handle fatigue, so they don't get sore as fast. And when we get fatigued as athletes, that can also lead to greater injury risk. Okay, these are some really fun statistics. So, some of my favorite ACL researchers who are mainly studying female athletes have compiled all their studies together and have said that consistent strength training leads to a 50% reduction in ACL injuries. So, obviously, it can never be 100% fully prevented. I want to be transparent here, just because we can't fully prevent injuries because things happen. There's a multitude of factors that go into injury risk. But if we can reduce by 50% with just consistent strength training alone, which is one piece to the puzzle, that's actually a really good number. So that gives these girls a really good fighting chance when they are strong. I had to add overuse injuries into the mix here. So things like Osgood-Schlatter or Sievers, where there's pain in the knee during the growth spurts or pain in the heel. If we're not taking care of these overuse injuries with consistent strength training and proper recovery, sometimes that can lead to more catastrophic things in high school or college, like an ACL tear. So we really want to make sure that female athletes are strong to these overuse injuries. And consistent strength training can lead to a 66% reduction in overuse injuries. And when I'm talking about consistent strength training, ideally year-round if you can. I know girls soccer players are extremely busy today, but you can get a lot of benefit with at least one time a week in season, maybe 2 times a week. And the good thing about strength training is you don't have to do a long hour to 2 hour workout. You can get a lot done in just 30 minutes time. You can hit the major muscle groups that protect the knee and then move on. It doesn't have to be anything that really cuts into soccer practice and school and really takes a lot out. So if you compound that 1 to 2 times a week over many months and many years, those are some amazing gains. So really keep that in mind with staying consistent. Okay, I just want to get into more of how strength actually, at the muscular level, protects the ACL. So we have our ACL in the back of the knee. It's a very, very tiny ligament, so very precarious. But the good news is we have a lot of surrounding muscle groups. So if you look over here, we're talking about strengthening the quad muscles, the hip extensors like the hamstrings, the glute med, the glute max, and also the calf muscles as well, and then the foot and ankle. So everything that basically goes up the entire leg. I know Emelia will talk about the kinetic chain probably and can explain it a lot better than me, but we don't just want to focus on being quad strong. I know a lot of soccer girls, we got the strong quads, but we want to make sure we're strengthening every muscle that safeguards the knee, so that those forces from those high velocity actions like cutting, jumping and landing, running at high speeds, we want to make sure those forces go to the muscles instead to absorb instead of the tiny ACL ligament. So that's really how it works at the most basic level. And another thing I'll mention about the type of strength training, it shouldn't only be legs, it should be total body just to stay balanced out. We also want to have a really strong core, a stable core. So we're training also the lower back muscles, the upper back muscles. We don't want to just be all legs as soccer players. We want to be strong everywhere because, again, the more muscle mass we have, we can also shield defenders and really protect our bodies. And also pull-ups are really fun for us soccer girls when we finally get that one, and that can help with confidence too. So I really love training pull-ups as well. One last thing to keep in mind here with strength training, once you start to add it in, you want to make sure your nutrition increases too. So, I'm not going to get into nutrition too much and how it plays a role in injury, but what you need to know is if we're raising our energy expenditure from adding strength training, that means we have to get those calories back into the body. We have to get protein, carbs, and fats back in so that our muscles can recover really quickly and also build and get stronger. So, to really get a benefit from strength training, yes, you have to strength train consistently, but the nutrition is what really builds those muscles. If you are malnourished, not getting enough calories, then you're losing muscle at that point. So, really keep this in mind. Once strength training increases, nutrition has to increase too. So, I really had to add that in there. All right, this is one of my favorite quotes. The more muscle mass you have, the more resilient you are to the vigorous demands of your sport. And I just had to include some of my favorite athletes who are very consistent with their strength training. Ilona from the U.S. women's rugby team, she's awesome. I don't know if you guys watch Dancing with the Stars, but she crushed it on there. And then Alex Morgan, Brandi Chastain from the 90s team, and then Serena Williams. The interesting thing about some of the girls on here is they've been criticized for their muscle mass. And I really want to repeat that that's okay. We have to be strong for our sport. It's okay to have muscle mass. I know Serena Williams has been criticized for being bulky, but that's okay. She's been the best tennis player in the world for all these years. She needs to have muscle mass to perform and to stay healthy. So I really want female athletes to chase that strength, chase that muscle mass. And I think that's it for mine. So wanted to keep it quick because I know Emelia has a lot to touch on. Jen, do you want to pass it off to Emelia now and we can do questions at the end?
Yeah, that works for me. Sounds good.
Yeah, absolutely. Perfect, Amelia. You're
Awesome.
please.
Thanks so much, Erica. Yeah, and feel free to keep introducing yourself in the chat. It's really helpful for us to get an idea, your involvement in the game. If you're a player, parent, coach, just so we can get a sense as well and how we can kind of tackle your questions at the end. But yeah, so I'll share my screen. Should be able to see that. Sweet. So a bit of an intro from myself. You might sense a bit of a weird accent. I'm in the UK right now. It's a little bit late at night, so excuse me if I stutter at all, but hopefully all good. So my background is in a little bit of engineering, but also sports science. So pretty much the nerdy side of things behind footwear. And so I work for this company called Ida Sports, as Jen did a great job of introing. So we are a league for women's footwear. So we solely focus on building performance footwear for female athletes. And we really kind of base a lot of what we do around this stat. So more than 80% of elite female footballers have been found to experience some level of pain or discomfort while wearing football boots. Again, sorry, I might say football boots, I might say soccer cleats, I might say a bit of both. So you have to keep with me. But this was a study done with the European Clubs Association with professional athletes over here across the pond. And just a shocking statistic, and it came out kind of a couple of years ago now, it hit the major news headlines, but we found this, we started before this came out, but it really exemplifies why we're doing what we're doing. And so our goal is to decrease that percentage ultimately. And we say, this shrink it and pink it, which is kind of what the industry started around making women's and girls soccer cleats. So we are saying that's not enough. So we aim to develop gear and footwear that, supports women from a biomechanical standpoint. And it, has all these unique aspects, which I'll dive into as well. But that's really important because we kind of focus on comfort as our main pillar. So in published literature and research around footwear, there's a lot of kind of different lenses of thought, but the kind of one that is confirmed time and time again is that comfort is the most important when choosing footwear. And if you can be comfortable when you're first kind of putting your feet into footwear, then that can have long-term effects that cascade. So you can then increase performance and you can decrease injury risk just by having that correlation with comfort. So again, you can do all the research in the world with the shoes and all these different things, and we will go into some different variables and aspects of footwear, but comfort is that number one. So that's why I really want to stress that. And that's why it's really important that we try and decrease that 82% number, so that, we are comfortable in our footwear. And so starting with this, a soccer cleat is quite basic. So if you look at a running shoe, you see time and time again now, massive midsoles with massive cushioning, and it looks really comfortable, right? And then you see a soccer cleat and it's very minimal. And that's the nature of the sport. You want to be able to touch the ball, have a great feel on the ball, good like shooting accuracy, things like that. But that really affects kind of what can be changed for that comfort aspect as well. So really all aspects of the soccer cleat from the top down really impact that comfort. First of which kind of is that fit and support aspect. So if you can get that upper or the top bit of the soccer cleat to really fit you well, then again, that can have a massive impact on comfort. If you have a wider foot or a narrower foot, again, you might be kind of on those edges of the bell curve, and it might be a little bit more difficult to get that fit right. And that's where you can explore different models and different materials of soccer cleats as well. But it's really important to get that fit right, as you can see in this image here too. When your foot starts to kind of overhang in that soccer cleat, that itself can be kind of, lead to greater risk of injury, because you're causing higher pressures at that foot. So that's fit and support. And then there's pressure and stiffness. So this comes in a little bit more lower down the soccer cleat. So again, running shoes, I'll use again as a comparison, they're flat. So when you're running, your pressures are transferred across the whole sole of the shoe. With a soccer cleat, you've inherently got these studs so that you don't slip and things like that. But those studs themselves, again, if not worn on the correct surface, can cause increased pressures. That's the whole point of them, really. And they're these localized areas of higher pressure. And again, that itself can increase kind of the impact on the foot and up the kinetic chain, as Eric said as well. Stiffness is also a bit of that as well. If you want the right balance between too stiff of a soccer cleat where you can't even bend it really, and too flexible where, it's not supporting you in the way you need. So more on that pressure aspect, like I was saying. So again, those studs act as localized points of high pressure, and that's especially if they don't go fully into the surface. So imagine, you're wearing your soccer cleats to the pitch and you're clipping along the pavement. Those are all those high pressures that you're feeling underneath. Once you get on the grass, obviously it feels a bit better. But depending on the grass and what kind of grass, again, there's all sorts of different surfaces that are played on in different conditions of surfaces. So again, that's where it's really important to think about what you're playing on. Are your studs fully going into that surface, or are they not? So like here, where they're sitting on top of the surface, maybe the surface is really compacted, or you're playing on natural grass and it's very dry and you're not going into the ground at all, you're just sitting on top. So that again, that's where then all the pressure is on those studs. Whereas here, great, you're going into the surface and the whole kind of sole is covered. And so you're able to distribute that pressure a little bit more. So again, I want to explain kind of all the mechanisms behind this. So again, hopefully it'll make sense as we go. But so my main message here is kind of thinking more about what surface you're playing on and how you can best select footwear to suit that need for both the surface and the conditions, as well as things like fatigue and training load. So even starting to think, how does your body feel? How does the surface feel? And then how can you control the controllables, which is potentially your footwear? So again, with pressure, considering that surface type, condition, training load, fatigue. And like I said, the shoe's controllable, but the surface isn't always. You can't show up to the pitch and be like, nope, I don't want to play here. I want to play on a different surface. That can't always happen. Whoops. And then again, so last kind of part of this equation of this soccer cleat, that traction. So we talk about traction a lot. That is, again, Erica mentioned the forces from those high velocity movements, those cutting motions. How are you able to change direction so quickly is the force that is happening between the shoe and the ground. And a lot of that is impacted by this outsole design. So the outsole is the sole, the bottom of the shoe, the bit has studs on it. It's plastic normally. So again, this kind of mechanism is where the forces are happening here at the ground, that then can transfer up to the ankle, up to the knee, and then again, that is the actual force that is kind of being put on the body. And again, if your muscles aren't at a point where they can kind of deal with that force, then that's when injury can happen. So if one force is greater than the reaction force, that's when something can break. Hopefully that makes sense. So how can we think about this in terms of injury risk? Again, can we look to reduce that rotational force? So perhaps you've got a high training load, your muscles are fatigued, they might not be able to combat some of these forces. So what can you change? You can't necessarily quickly change your muscles and their fatigue. You can't change the surface you're on, but can you change the footwear you're wearing to kind of, lessen those forces at the ground in that scenario? Sometimes you want to increase those forces. If you're playing on a super, super muddy pitch, then perhaps you do need to opt for a bit more traction. But again, the whole point is thinking around the shoe and the surface, how they interact, and then again with your body. Something also to think about here is returning to play. So if you are coming back from an injury, there's a super important protocol where you probably don't want to go directly into your big studs. You probably want to start wearing, something comfy like a running shoe or a turf football boot, and kind of go up from there. And then here's kind of a big diagram, which for those who are more visual like me in the room or the Zoom. So here I've tried to kind of highlight that a lot of these shoes were kind of made with a specific surface in mind, but it doesn't necessarily mean that they're siloed to those surfaces. Indoor, again, you could wear indoor on all of these if you want. Like I could have put circles on all of them. You might slip is the only thing. So again, it's thinking about slipping versus stopping. And would you rather slip a little bit, or would you really want to stop completely and have the load go to your joints, really? So that's what you need to think about here. So again, indoor, I've kind of put indoor court. But again, if you want to wear them on here, you just have to be mindful, how wet is it? Are you going to slip? And if you're slipping loads, then maybe you need to go up and increase that traction. So here we have a turf shoe. So if you're not familiar with a turf shoe, even has a bit of midsole, so a little bit more cushioning there. And then it's got these kind of rubber grippy points that can kind of sink in a tiny bit to a turf surface. So these historically were designed and developed for a second generation artificial grass. That's kind of like a carpet grass, quite hard, very short piles of grass. And so that's what it's developed for. A lot of people wear these on indoor court surfaces. Again, you could do this. You just have to be mindful that it might be a little bit too grippy. And so if you're starting to feel that it's too grippy, that's when you might say, hey, look, I actually need to get my indoors out. Same thing, so going the other way on 3G. So if you don't know what 3G artificial grass is, that's the longer blades of plastic grass with those rubber bits that get everywhere basically in your house and are very annoying. So that's 3G surfaces. And so again, thinking about, is it a wet day? Then again, with a turf, you might edge on the slipping. But again, you might be okay with that. You might be like, I'd rather slip than have too much kind of load going to my joints today because I'm quite fatigued because I've had quite a high training load. So again, thinking about climate, surface, and training load. If it's a drier day, then you might be totally fine with your turfs and 3G. Again, same for grass. If it's really dry day, and in the US, I grew up in Georgia, and I remember playing in the summer, and you'd like play on pitches that were just so dry and so hard. And again, you could be totally fine wearing a turf trainer. So starting to rethink, you don't always need to get the studs out, especially like that image if the studs are sitting on top of the surface. Cool. And then another thing to note too is if you are a younger player, perhaps, like if you're a lower body mass, things like that, again, you might not be kind of putting as much force through the ground where you need this kind of traction to change direction. If you're kind of a lower body mass, a younger player, you might also be able to wear these turfs and be totally fine as long as you're not slipping. So then if we move up to FG/AG or AG boots, again, these are called firm grounds or artificial grass boots. So this is an IDA one. I tried to put IDA ones where I could, but So again, they have kind of shorter length of studs and typically more conical studs and don't have any blades. But these can be worn quite a lot. So in 3G surfaces, on dry, hard grass, because again, you've got more of those studs to distribute the pressure, as well as lush grass. When you get to wet and soft grass, again, it depends how muddy. Here in the UK. It can be a total swamp, basically. But this is where, again, you might start to slip. So then you have to kind of consider either you're fine with slipping or you move up the traction. And again, so firm ground, I've put a bladed option here. So being careful with the blades on 3G and dry hard grass, just because there's less studs to distribute pressures if it's harder, as well as you might not want as much traction on that artificial grass there. Another thing to note for 3G is it can really change a lot throughout a season if it depends on how well maintained it is. So really with these artificial grass pitches, they should be brushing them and well maintaining them. A lot of the times that doesn't happen. So again, thinking, is this a super compacted surface? Does it feel quite hard underneath? And do I want to opt for a different shoe? So again, it's not a catch-all with 3G. You have to look at it. I played on one today and it was like, you didn't see much green. It was mostly black. So it's just covered in that rubber crumb. So again, thinking, does this feel a bit too grippy and should I choose a different sole plate? And lastly, soft ground. So again, soft grounds really have been developed to have a higher traction. So again, you want to be careful where you wear these. And again, those are pretty much meant for that wet, soft, muddy grass. So how does all of this relate to what I do? Again, I've talked a lot about kind of recommendations and really just making the choice based on, again, the feel of your body, the feel of the environment. And then here's a little bit about IDA and what the options are and how we kind of take that into account for the female player. So we started with comfort overall, right? And we started with fit and support. So we have a women's fit. So we base our shoe based off of it's called a shoe last, and that's developed based on female foot dimensions. So again, we provide a female specific fit. So ideally another option that can be more suitable in terms of fit for the female player. That includes a wider toe box compared to the width at the heel, so a little bit more triangular as opposed to rectangular. That narrower heel cup can really help to support that heel and lock it down. Having arch support to support the higher arches that a lot of women have compared to men. And then as well, I should have put, but you saw it on this slide, a stud configuration that has kind of shorter studs, rounder studs that will kind of best optimize traction for the female player across a multitude of surfaces as well. So again, that's a little bit about our shoes. If you want more resources, feel free to check out our expert advice blog, sorry. We've got quite a few blogs up that can kind of dive a lot more into this that I've just briefly covered here. I also really recommend, for some reason the little image didn't come through, but this is from the Aspetar Sports Medicine Journal and written by Athol Thompson, John Wanup, and Katrine Krieger. And this is a really great resource that kind of explains a lot of this in kind of research terminology, but it's easy to understand and it really is a great one if you're kind of unsure what to wear for kind of not necessarily various surfaces, but as kind of a female player. And lastly, I love ending on this slide because it's more than a shoe as well. What we're doing at IDA, it's also this whole movement and being able to go into a sports store and feel seen. There is a massive dropout rate for women and young girls in the sport. And so to go into a store and see a product that is developed specifically for you, we hope that will also kind of keep them in the game. So we kind of put female athletes at the forefront and we'll always, and yeah, that's pretty much it. Hope you guys enjoyed and we'll open for questions now.
Yeah, everybody, we'd love to, to hear from you. If anybody has a question or a thought or wants to share a story. So please feel free. We'd love to see you too, if you feel comfortable.
Yeah, awesome. I'm happy to see there's someone over here staying up late with me in Scotland. Love it.
Yeah.
I'm just reading through the chat.
Do you want us
Any
to put them in the chat, or how do you want to ask the questions? This is Greg, by the way.
Hey, Greg. Either way, I mean, if you want to ask out loud, just maybe can you raise your hand on here? Is that a
Oh, I
thing?
think we got one. There's one in the chat.
Oh,
Um,
But go ahead, Greg. Why don't we start with
yeah.
you?
okay.
Yeah, we'll start with you.
My question's for Erica in terms of like, ACL prevention. You talked about strength training. My question is, how much do you do with female athletes in terms of like plyos, more specifically like depth drop, stuff like that, just so they learn how to land and all that sort of stuff? When you say strength training, are you incorporating that into that, or is plyo something a little different that you're not doing in strength?
Yeah, so that should be a part of a full strength and performance program, so female athletes can absorb force better and learn how to land properly and be able to decelerate, because that's where a lot of those injuries happen is during that deceleration of a cut or a change of direction. So they need the muscular strength in the quads and hips and the hamstrings, but they also need the mechanical control with learning how to land in a controlled setting. So yeah, as far as plyometrics, I like to also incorporate those 1 to 2 times a week. Usually they're as warm up to a strength training session. We start with plyos first because they tend to take more energy and they're a lot more technical. So we do them when the girl is really fresh at the start of a session. And for girls who are just beginning learning how to land and do plyos, I like to start on 2 feet first. So start super general, teach them the technique, and then we eventually progress to landing on one leg and then maybe going laterally instead of forward or up and down. So lateral, doing it twisting, so rotational jumps. And then you also mentioned like depth drop jumps. Those are like the most advanced ones we do. I tend to save those for my high school girls who have not only a high chronological age, but a high training age as well. And they've been through that pathway of learning plyos. So yeah, that's something we definitely incorporate. And I encourage everyone on this call to include those plyos. And the last thing I'll say about plyos is we don't want girls to be doing them for minutes on end because that's going to cause fatigue. It's too much volume to even get the benefit from a plyo because either form gets bad or they start to slow down and we're not building fast twitch muscles. So usually my plyo drills are anywhere from 5 to 10 seconds max. So if you see anyone doing plyos where it's like 2 minutes of hops, no, 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 major red flag there. So we don't want that. We want plyos to be very short and efficient.
Do you have a foot contact for like different age groups, like max foot contacts and plyos?
I would say for just under 12s, I mean, I don't really do formal plyos with them. It's more just free play. So, jump rope, leapfrog, jumping on park benches. I don't really monitor the load there because they're getting so much variety to a bunch of different muscle groups and they're building a lot of coordination. But, yeah, usually in season, I keep it below 50 or 30 contacts. It really depends on their schedule, but definitely wouldn't be doing 100 to 200 contacts during the season because during the season, the goal is game readiness. So we don't really want to let a strength session ruin tomorrow, ruin game readiness.
Thank you very much.
Great. We have a question here from, let's see. There was a question about how young is too young? This is from Stacy Sessoms. How young is too young to begin strength training?
So I should have defined strength training a little bit better. So it's anything where you use your body against resistance or with a piece of equipment. So I'll just go through just how I structure it for our long-term pathway. But anything under 12 to 13, I usually like to start with body weight. So jump rope could be considered a strength exercise, strength and plyo. Doing like a pull-up hold could be a strength exercise. So I like to start with body weight first and teach them the movements. And then once they get through the growth spurt, usually around like age 13, 14, that's when I start to add a little bit more load, whether that's with dumbbells, barbells, hex bars for deadlifts, and weighted vests for pull-ups or push-ups. So it's something you just want to be really gradual with. You want to take your time because girls have their entire high school, college, maybe if they make pro, they have that whole time to do heavy, heavy lifting. So just when you start young, under 12 or 13, focus on body weight, focus on getting a variety of movement, playing a variety of sports, just really building the basic coordination and body awareness before we start to load too heavy. Because if we load too heavy too fast, especially during growth spurts, that's when we run into overuse injury problems, and it's just more of a risk than a reward.
Question from Susan Conaway. Are there precursor injuries to look out for in advance for potential ACL injuries?
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to predict. We don't know 100%, but I would say if an athlete has chronic muscle soreness or chronic pain even in the knee or the heel during those growth spurt years, I mean, that means that she's not recovering. And when you're not recovered, your risk can be a lot higher. So really take those growing pains seriously when they happen and get help, whether that's with a physical therapist or maybe taking some time away from sport or cutting back in the soccer load. It's not normal to be in pain that much or sore all the time. So yeah, that can definitely increase risk of ACL. So just be aware of those.
Aofi is asking, what differences should there be in strength training during the season and during off season in terms of exercises and loading?
Well, hopefully you have an off season because if you're in the ECNL or GA, pretty much you're going through 9, 10 months a year. So your off season's a little bit different. I would say for those girls who maybe only get a month or two off, really just focus on speed and strength. 3 to 4 times a week is good during the off season. And then in season, I would say volume should be 1 to 2 times a week. And if you're looking to play in college, you can also expect that template with your college strength coach. In season, they're very conservative, I would say, at that level. I am as well, especially with the growing girls soccer player. So yeah, 1 to 2 times a week in season and 3 to 4 in the off season is usually good.
I have a question. Parents ask us this, truth or myth? Are you more susceptible to ACL injuries around your period?
Well, with that one, we don't have enough research yet. And this one really riles me up because I think it's holding girls and women back. And I'm sure Amelia, I will definitely want you to chime in on this one, but there are a lot of girls and women who don't feel negative symptoms during certain times of the month. They actually feel very groovy, and you'll see these big headlines where they're like, "Oh, during this phase you need to take off," or "You're susceptible to injury." And it's like, well, what if she's feeling great? Are you going to tell her she can't step on the field and play a game she loves? So kind of coming back to just Amelia giving her presentation and what I talked about earlier, we want to control the controllables here. So We can control how strong we are as girls and women. We can control the footwear that we buy. We can't really control menstrual cycles. We should have one, right? If we don't, that's not healthy. We're at a higher risk for injury if we don't have a cycle. Bone fractures as well, and just other health repercussions. But we are going to have cycles, so the only things we can control are our strength, footwear. Nutrition helps with any negative menstrual cycle symptoms as well. So focus on feeling empowered rather than disempowered. So I think sometimes when we have this talk around ACL risk and menstrual cycle, we tend to make it a self-fulfilling prophecy. Like during a certain week in the month, we're supposed to feel like crap or get hurt or take a wrong step. That can really freak a young girl out if that's the language we're using. And I think we need to stop it altogether. So, Amelia, if you want to add to that, I know I just ranted
No,
for a
you
little
just
bit.
put it perfectly, to be honest. Yeah, we always say control the controllables. There's so many risk factors for ACL injury. There's some really good like webs out there that people have made of all of the different kind of risk factors. And some of them are just social, like young girls haven't always had the chance to be so involved in strength training, and Erica's obviously, providing great resources so that they can be involved, but that's not always been the case. So I think even that is kind of, there's so many, and you can really only control what you can. So yeah. And again, I agree that it kind of puts it in the head as well. And it's a positive bias then of like, oh no, I'm on my period. I'm going to be a little bit more tentative going into this tackle. And then actually that lack of confidence is then causing that increased risk. So yeah, with you, Erica. Sydney, you have a question? And then we've got some in the chat as well.
Yeah, hello. Hi, Amelia. This is a question for you. Just as a background, I am graduating this spring with a degree in mechanical engineering, so kind of interested in the engineering background of footwear. I also did a little like research project in my biomechanics class last semester. So I was looking into like comparing a bunch of different cleats and just kind of like, I guess, more like literature reviews and that kind of sense. But I was kind of curious if in your research you found that like a certain aspect of the like sole plate design is more important, like the length of stud, shape of stud, or like the actual configuration. And even just going off of that, I play mostly on turf, and I've been wearing like AG cleats for a while now, and even like between the same brand, their sole plates will be different. So I'm just kind of curious, like what you think the most important part about that is.
Yeah, manufacturers love to make it very complicated for you all, and they also love to call them different things as well. So, I'm with you on that confusion for sure. I think the big thing is stud length and also the number of studs. It depends on what surface you're on as well, so you can really get granular with it. So 3G surfaces like the rubber crumb, the way it moves. So as you start to move one stud into the rubber crumb, it kind of makes way for another stud if you've got more studs, if that makes sense. Depending on obviously the patterns of movement as well. So there's some researchers here in the UK at Loughborough who are even looking that granular at the movement of that, rubber, those rubber pieces, and how the studs kind of interact with it. So again, the length as well, because it determines how far you're penetrating into the surface as well. So sometimes if you've got like really, really long studs, we've been doing a study where we're actually looking at, like I was showing with the pressure images, how far is the surface they're actually going, and are they fully going in or not? So again, that I think that stud length is a big one for that traction, as well as the number of studs themselves. Shape is a very hard one as well because so many designs just incorporate multiple different shapes as well. So isolating the shapes themselves haven't been done too much. And if you look in the literature, there's a lot of confounding kind of information there as well. But generally, it's thought that those long blades, depending on kind of what orientation they're in exactly, but that can kind of impact and cause higher resistance in the ground as well. So hopefully that
Also,
answered what was there the second part with
oh no, just
oh
actually
yeah,
it's thought of like a
AG. Yeah.
Yeah,
So
AG,
yeah,
but
it's just the different brands kind of taking different directions with design for artificial grass and things like that. Obviously, there's multi-ground now. So I saw a question in the chat too of, what kind of rule of thumb looking for an AG/MG boot. Since, you can't always afford having 6 different pairs of boots in your wardrobe, for sure. So again, I think AG and MG are generally depending on what climate you're in. If you're in a really boggy, wet climate, then you might need another option where you can increase that traction. But generally, those AG/MG boots definitely cover a wider range of surfaces. But again, look at different brands, compare the designs, because the MG multi-ground boots are just kind of the cheaper price point as well. So there's a little bit of differentiation there. But yeah, again, it's because a lot of big brands don't talk to each other and they all do their own research. So that's pretty much why. No great answer, but
thank you.
Anyone else?
there is a couple. So Jeremy asked a little bit about the Ida boots and the design. Obviously, with some kind of bigger brands starting to come out with women's boots now. So the one kind of bit about Ida is that we truly design with a female specific last, which is what the shoe is made around in the factory, as well as sole plate. So if you look at a lot of these brands who are coming out with women's boots, I would urge you to look at the sole plate and then look at and compare the men's and women's sole plate and see if it's any different. That's what I would urge you to do, and you'll find that a lot of them are the exact same sole plate. So again, they're just changing kind of the shape of the shoe, and that's it. So again, up to you to kind of do that research as well, but we are the only brand, as I know it, that's designed with a female specific sole plate as well as that last. Yeah.
Fantastic. Such great information, guys. Anybody else looking through the?
I think Susan had one that we missed. Saying about ACL injuries occurring on turf as non-contact. Is there any thought for kind of getting girls off the turf and back to the grass? I will say, like, so we do quite a bit of research with this company called Raw Stadia, and they do a lot of kind of surface testing, and they do it in the NFL and the Premiership here in England. And so they test pitches for all these different clubs, and so we've partnered with them to then test our kind of sole plates and mark against competitors and such like that. I will say that a well-maintained 3G artificial grass is not necessarily higher risk than natural grass. It just depends on the maintenance of it, and that's where it can really vary. So Susan, I would urge your facilities or whoever, I would go ask them, what are you doing to maintain your pitch? And how often are they doing it? And are they getting it tested at all? Things like that. So that's kind of what I would urge you to do. Hopefully that helps. Cool. I think that's all the questions I've seen.
Same.
Anyone else have any?
I don't
we
think
got them
we're.
all. Yeah.
Oh, we have a heel cup question here from
Severs.
Kristen Worth.
Yeah, so with Severs, again, I'm not a podiatrist, put it out there. Erica, I don't know if you have any input on Severs as well. But so our youth line, we did look at Severs when we were doing the design of our boot. And so the heel cup there, we try and add just a tiny bit more of cushioning to lift that heel and alleviate a bit of that strain that can be, caused on the kind of tendons. So that's kind of the main aspect there. The narrow heel cup, as long as you're supported, I would urge you to try it. But as long as you're supported, again, it all again goes back to comfort. So if you're comfortable, it fits you well, and you're supported, then potentially it could help. So I'd urge you to have a go.
Yeah, I think one other thing with severs is it is a overuse injury. So
Yeah.
if the pain is greater than a 6 out of 10 after every game, every practice, then that's your sign to maybe cut back a little bit on soccer. Maybe not sit completely out, but maybe 1 or 2 practices a week, see how you feel. If it's still a 6 out of 10, then you may need some time away for that overuse to finally rest and repair. So it really is a case by case scenario. So the time off and then maybe gradually going back in would help really well.
For sure. And even again, like we said, selecting different footwear, like maybe you want to try a turf shoe, a little bit more cushioning again. So yeah.
Great stuff, guys. Thank you. What a great way to spend a Sunday here. And I'm thanks everyone for coming. We had a really good showing here, and let me know. You guys, everybody has Girls Soccer Network's Instagram. You can always DM me if there's anything you forgot to ask. I'll make sure that that Emelia, will get the message, and we'll definitely keep you informed on all of this stuff. So, and we'll be having more of these events. So, and Erica is always accessible to GSN. So, yeah, and also everybody who's given me their email is going to be entered to win a pair of IDAs. And if anybody wants to buy a pair, I'm going to send you, this is our little link here. Check out their footwear online if you are so inclined to. So, I think that's it. I think, go on and enjoy the rest of your day. And thanks for coming.
Thank you guys.
Yeah, thanks very much.
Thank you.
I have a quick question. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah, Cal, go for
Okay.
it.
I saw like a promotion the other day where it looked like you're going to be making rugby shoes. It said like never settle at the top, and it was, I believe, partnered with Guinness. Is there anything specifically different between what's going to be on those shoes versus the soccer shoes?
Yeah, so it's a great question. So again, the main question is, what is a rugby shoe? And again, I think because of the comparison of the sport with football, or soccer, obviously there's a massive global audience for soccer. So actually a lot of rugby players tend to wear football shoes or soccer cleats, if that makes sense. And then there's like your traditional rugby shoes, which have like very big metal studs. So depending on the position, do you play rugby, Cal?
I've recently started.
Okay, cool. Well, depending
And
on
I
the
got
position, depending on the climate and where you are. So in the UK, there's a lot of rugby players who are who are potentially like a forward, and they're in the scrum more, and they need more traction potentially to kind of really scrum against each other, if you will. And so that's when they might opt for a more traditional rugby boot, which has a lot longer metal studs. So we have done a soft launch of a soft ground boot. So to be launched later in the year fully, but yes, we had a partnership with Guinness to sponsor kind of some ambassadors and players in the Women's Six Nations, which is the tournament between England, Ireland, Scotland, Wales, Italy, and France. So yeah, they're on debut as we speak.
Okay,
Hopefully
nice.
that answered your question.
Yeah. I
Cool.
wasn't really able to find any women's rugby shoes, so
Yes,
I got
the
one of
first
your pairs,
one.
and they're great.
Yeah, awesome. Yeah, stay tuned for a few months' time.
Okay, thank you.
Of course. All right.
Thank you guys.
All right. Thanks, everyone.
All righty.
Thank you.
Signing off.